It began with a single invisible spark, an echo of competition that would stretch beyond Earth itself. On October 4th, 1957, a metallic sphere the size of a beach ball soared into the heavens and began to beep. Beep, beep, beep. Those sounds, transmitted from Sputnik, weren't just radio waves. They were a wake-up call. The Soviet Union had launched the first artificial satellite into orbit, and the United States, once confident in its scientific superiority, suddenly found itself trailing behind. The race for space had begun, and it was about far more than science. This was a race for dominance, for pride, for the future of humanity. The year was 1957, the height of the Cold War. Two superpowers glared at each other across a divided world. Both had nuclear weapons that could destroy cities in minutes. But the skies, those infinite, untamed skies, were still up for grabs. Whoever conquered them first would command not only the high ground, but the imagination of the planet. When Sputnik's beeps echoed through the night sky, Americans panicked. If the Soviets could launch a satellite, they could launch a missile, anywhere. Schools began air raid drills, parents bought bomb shelters, politicians demanded action. And in the White House, President Dwight D. Eisenhower authorized something that would change history, the creation of NASA. The space race was no longer about exploration. It was about survival. Yet, the Soviets were already sprinting ahead. Less than a month after Sputnik, they launched Sputnik 2, carrying a stray dog named Laika. She became the first living being to orbit Earth. The world celebrated the triumph and mourned her sacrifice. Laika's tiny capsule circled Earth for days before the heat claimed her life. To the Soviets, she was a hero. To the Americans, she was a haunting reminder of how far behind they'd fallen. In the United States, engineers worked frantically to catch up. Their first attempt, Vanguard TV-3, was supposed to prove America's might. Instead, it exploded spectacularly on the launch pad, seconds after ignition. Newspapers mocked it as Flopnik. The Soviet press called it Kaputnik. Even Life magazine ran photos of the disaster. But failure, as it often does, sparked fury and genius. Under the guidance of Werner von Braun, a former German rocket scientist who had once built weapons for Hitler, America found its footing. Von Braun's team launched Explorer 1 in 1958, finally putting the US in orbit. The space race was officially neck and neck. Then came 1961, a year that changed everything. On April 12th, the Soviets stunned the world once again. Yuri Gagarin, a 27-year-old pilot from a small village, became the first human in space. His spacecraft, Vostok 1, completed a full orbit of Earth in just 108 minutes.
Poyakali, let's go!
When he returned, he wasn't just a cosmonaut, he was a global icon. Statues were erected, crowds chanted his name, and the Soviet Union declared that socialism had triumphed in the heavens. For the United States, Gagarin's flight was a blow to the gut. America, the land of innovation, was now publicly second best.
But just 6 weeks later, a young president stood before Congress with a declaration so audacious it silenced the doubt. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. The
moon, the ultimate prize. The challenge was staggering. At that moment, the US had a total of 15 minutes of human spaceflight experience. 15 minutes. Against the endless darkness of space. Yet Kennedy's words lit a fire. NASA's Mercury program turned test pilots into astronauts. They trained to the point of collapse, riding centrifuges, enduring isolation chambers, learning to trust computers that barely had the power of a pocket calculator. One of them, Alan Shepard, became the first American in space. Another, John Glenn, orbited the Earth 3 times in 1962, becoming a national hero. Each mission was a baby step. Each success was a message. We're coming for you, Moscow. But space was unforgiving. Behind the triumphs were tragedies hidden from the public eye. Both nations lost lives in the pursuit of glory. In 1967, 3 American astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were trapped inside their Apollo 1 capsule when a fire ignited during a ground test. There was no escape. The blaze consumed the cabin in seconds. The shock was devastating, and NASA nearly fell apart. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviets faced their own disasters. Secret missions ended in explosions and silence. Cosmonauts perished, but their names were erased from records, hidden by censorship. The Soviet people were told only of triumphs, never of loss. Still, both sides pressed on. The Soviets achieved another milestone with Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space. The Americans countered with the Gemini missions, mastering spacewalks, orbital docking, and endurance, all critical for a journey to the moon. The tension built like a drumbeat. Every launch was a gamble, every success a headline. And then came 1968, the year when the world seemed on fire. War in Vietnam, assassinations, riots. But in December, humanity found something transcendent. Apollo 8 became the first manned spacecraft to orbit the moon. Astronaut Bill Anders turned his camera toward home and captured Earthrise, a fragile blue marble floating in the void. For a brief moment, the space race gave the world not rivalry, but perspective. The Soviets, though, were losing ground. Their N-1 moon rocket, their answer to America's Saturn V, was a monster that never roared to life without exploding. Each failure was hidden from the public, but inside the Kremlin, the panic was real. And then came July 20th, 1969. Millions watched as Neil Armstrong descended a ladder and uttered the words that would echo through history. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The American flag stood on lunar soil, and with it, the United States claimed victory in the greatest race humanity had ever run. The Soviet dream of the moon quietly faded. They turned their focus to space stations, Salyut, Mir, and long-duration missions. NASA, meanwhile, reached for the stars with Voyager, Skylab, and eventually the Space Shuttle. The two rivals who once eyed each other with suspicion would, in time, shake hands in orbit. In 1975, during the Apollo-Soyuz test project, American astronauts and Soviet cosmonauts met face-to-face in space, their spacecraft docking like a symbolic truce. The space race had ended, not with a war, but with a handshake. Yet, the story doesn't truly end there. The competition that began with fear and pride ignited something far greater. It gave humanity satellites, weather forecasting, GPS, global communications, and a glimpse of our own fragility. The race to the moon was never just about politics. It was about proving what humans could do when they refused to accept limits. And perhaps that's the true legacy of the space race. Two bitter rivals, driven by conflict, accidentally uncovering the best parts of human nature, the curiosity to explore, the courage to risk everything, and the hope that someday we'll reach even further. After all, Sputnik's faint beeps still echo through history, a reminder that the moment we looked up in fear, we also began to dream.